The massive crystalline dragon Zephyra lay dying among the smoking ruins of her mountain home. Her once brilliant scales, which had shimmered like captured starlight, now dulled to a sickly gray. Purple blood seeped from countless wounds inflicted by the Krillian war machines that had torn through her defenses like paper. Behind her, hidden deep within the cavern's protective embrace, 3 young dragons no bigger than house cats huddled together. Their tiny wings trembled as explosions echoed through the tunnels. Zephyra had managed to seal them in the deepest chamber before the final assault, but she knew the barriers wouldn't hold forever. The Krillians were methodical in their destruction. These insectoid creatures had swept across 12 star systems in the past year, harvesting every intelligent species they encountered. Their bioships hung in the sky like diseased moons, occasionally sending down hunting parties to collect survivors for their processing facilities. Zephyra had been the last of the elder dragons, a guardian species that had protected this sector for over 10,000 years. Her kind possessed the rare ability to manipulate quantum fields, bending space and time to create nearly impenetrable shields. But even her ancient power had limits. The Krillian commander, a towering creature with mandibles that could crush steel, approached her fallen form. Its compound eyes reflected no mercy as it clicked orders to its subordinates. They began setting up drilling equipment, preparing to break through to the young dragons. "Your offspring will make excellent subjects for our experiments," the commander hissed in its synthetic voice. "Their quantum abilities will be most useful once we extract and replicate them." Zephyra tried to lift her great head, but her strength was fading fast. She had sent out a desperate psychic call across the galaxy before the battle, hoping some of the other guardian species might hear her plea, but none had answered. The Krillians had been too thorough in their conquest. As her vision began to blur, she noticed something strange in the upper atmosphere. Small objects were falling through the clouds like burning meteors. They were too small to be Krillian vessels, and they moved with an erratic pattern that suggested piloted craft rather than guided missiles. The first impact came without warning. A sleek metal object punched through the hull of the nearest bioship, causing it to list heavily to one side. Then another and another. The Krillian commander's attention snapped skyward as alarms began wailing from their vessels. These newcomers fought unlike anything the Krillians had encountered. Their ships were tiny compared to the massive bio-vessels, but they moved with incredible speed and precision. They struck like angry wasps, darting in to deliver devastating hits before disappearing again. From her position, Zephyra could see one of the attacking craft more clearly. It was sleek and gray with strange markings she didn't recognize. Through her failing quantum senses, she detected something unprecedented about the pilots inside these vessels. Their minds burned with a fierce protective rage that reminded her of a mother defending her young. But these weren't mothers. These were something else entirely. Something the galaxy had never seen before. As consciousness began to slip away from her, Zephyra felt a spark of hope. Perhaps her young ones would survive after all. Commander Sarah Chen gripped the controls of her fighter as she dove through the atmosphere of the devastated world below. Her squadron of 12 human pilots followed in tight formation, their ships screaming through the thin air at speeds that would have liquefied most other species. The distress signal had reached Earth's outer colonies 3 days ago. It wasn't like anything in their databases, a psychic scream that had somehow translated itself into every human language simultaneously. The message was simple: children in danger, mother dying, help needed. Humanity had only recently joined the galactic community, and they were still considered a minor species by most of the established powers. But when children were in danger, humans had a tendency to do things that defied all logic and self-preservation. "Contact ahead," reported Lieutenant Rodriguez from his sensor station. "Those bioships are massive. Each one's bigger than our entire fleet back home." Sarah studied the tactical display. The Krillians had 3 of their harvest vessels in low orbit, with smaller craft swarming around them like antibodies. On the surface, she could see the distinctive energy signature of something powerful and dying. "Remember the mission," she broadcast to her squadron. "We're not here to win a war. We're here to buy time and get those kids out." She paused, checking her weapon systems one more time. "And if any of you die before we complete this mission, I'll personally drag your ghosts back from whatever afterlife you end up in." The first attack run was pure chaos. Human ships were designed for speed and maneuverability, rather than heavy armor. They hit the Krillian formations like bullets, punching holes through their defensive screens and striking at critical systems before the enemy could react. The Krillians had never encountered anything like human combat tactics. Most species fought with careful strategy, preserving their forces and seeking advantageous positions. Humans fought like they were already dead and just hadn't gotten the message yet. Rodriguez's fighter took a direct hit from a plasma cannon, but instead of retreating, he rammed his burning ship directly into the weapon emplacement. The explosion took out half a deck on the nearest bioship. "Rodriguez is down," Sarah reported grimly. "That's one less ride home, people. Make it count." Meanwhile, on the surface, the Krillian drilling operation had stopped. The commander was screaming orders as his forces tried to respond to the unexpected attack. Several of his heavy units had been redirected to deal with the human fighters, leaving only a skeleton crew to continue the excavation. That was exactly what Sarah had been hoping for. While her squadron kept the enemy busy, a single human transport ship slipped through the defensive perimeter. It was piloted by Marcus Webb, a former mining engineer who had volunteered for what everyone knew was a suicide mission. Webb's ship touched down near the dragon's body with surprising gentleness. He emerged wearing a combat suit that looked primitive compared to most galactic technology, but it was tough and reliable. He approached the dying dragon carefully, his hands raised to show he meant no harm. "Hey there, big lady," he said softly, though he knew she probably couldn't understand his words. "Heard you've got some little ones that need help." Zephyr's great eye opened, focusing on this strange biped with difficulty. Through her quantum senses, she could feel something remarkable about this creature. His mind blazed with the same protective fury she had sensed in the attacking fighters. But underneath it was something else, a deep, abiding love for all young life. With her last remaining strength, she sent him a mental image. The location of her young, the nature of the barriers protecting them, and a desperate plea for their safety. Webb nodded as if he had understood perfectly. "Don't worry, Mom. We've got this. That's what humans do." The barriers protecting the young dragons were beyond anything in human technology. Webb stood before the shimmering quantum wall that sealed the cavern entrance, running his hands over equipment that defied every law of physics he understood. The energy patterns were beautiful but completely alien. "Come on, you overgrown lizard eggs," he muttered to himself, studying the readings on his scanner. "Your mama told me how to get in here, but she forgot to mention I'd need a degree in impossible science." Above ground, the battle was intensifying. Sarah's squadron had been reduced to 8 ships, but they had managed to cripple one of the biovessels and force the other 2 into defensive positions. The Krillians were adapting to human tactics faster than expected, though, and their return fire was becoming more accurate. "Chen, this is Patterson," came a crackling voice over the comm. "I've got multiple bogies closing on Webb's position. They're sending a ground team." Sarah cursed and rolled her fighter into a steep dive. She could see the Krillian dropships descending toward the Dragon's Mountain, their hulls bristling with soldiers and heavy weapons. Webb would be trapped in those tunnels with nowhere to run. "All units, priority protection of the ground team," she ordered. "I don't care if we have to kamikaze every last ship. Those kids are getting out of here." Meanwhile, Webb had made a breakthrough. The quantum barriers weren't locked by technology, they were locked by emotion. Zephyrah had woven her maternal love into the very fabric of the shield, creating something that could only be opened by someone with the same protective instinct. Webb pressed his palm against the barrier and thought about his own daughter back on Earth. He thought about every child he had ever seen laugh, cry, or sleep peacefully. He thought about the universal need to protect the innocent. Regardless of species or origin, the barrier dissolved like morning mist. Inside the chamber, 3 tiny dragons looked up at him with eyes like liquid starlight. They were no bigger than house cats, their scales a brilliant silver that seemed to capture and reflect light from dimensions he couldn't see. Despite their youth, he could sense an intelligence behind those eyes that was both ancient and utterly innocent. "Hey there, little ones," Webb said softly, kneeling down to their level. "Your mom sent me to get you out of here. I know I probably look pretty weird to you, but I promise I'm one of the good guys." The young dragons huddled together, communicating in soft musical tones that made Webb's heart ache. They were afraid, but they seemed to sense something trustworthy about this strange bipedal creature. One of them, slightly braver than the others, approached Webb slowly. It reached out with a tiny clawed hand and touched his armored glove. Immediately, Webb felt a flood of images and emotions, loneliness, fear, but also curiosity about this new being who smelled of determination and protective love. "Yeah, I've got kids too," Webb said, carefully scooping up the young dragon. "Well, one kid. Her name's Emma, and she's about your age in human years. She'd love to meet you guys." The other two dragons seemed to take comfort from their siblings' acceptance of Webb. They allowed him to gently gather them into a specially designed containment unit that would keep them safe during transport. The unit was lined with soft materials and had atmospheric controls to maintain their comfort. Just as Webb finished securing the young dragons, the first explosions echoed through the tunnels. The Krillian ground forces had breached the outer chambers and were fighting their way deeper into the mountain. Their energy weapons sent cascades of stone falling from the ceiling. Webb activated his comm unit. "Chen, this is ground team. I've got the packages, but I'm about to have some very unfriendly visitors." "Copy that, Webb. Hold tight. Cavalry's coming." But even as she spoke, Sarah knew her remaining ships couldn't hold off the Krillian forces much longer. They needed a miracle, and humans were notoriously short on those when they needed them most. That's when the second wave arrived. The human reinforcements that arrived weren't military vessels. They were civilian ships, cargo haulers, passenger liners, mining vessels, and even a few converted pleasure craft. News of the rescue mission had spread through human space faster than official channels could contain it. Captain Elena Vasquez commanded the makeshift fleet from her converted mining barge, the Stubborn Mule. She had left her family's asteroid mining operation the moment she heard about children in danger, gathering every ship she could find along the way. "This is civilian rescue fleet to human fighters," she broadcast. "We're not much to look at, but we've got heavy lifting gear and some very creative modifications. What do you need?" Sarah almost laughed despite the desperate situation. Only humans would respond to a military crisis by sending in the equivalent of pickup trucks and farm equipment. "Vasquez, we need those ground forces off Webb's back, and we need a way to punch through their orbital blockade." "Copy that. All civilian ships, you heard the lady. Time to show these bugs what human ingenuity looks like." What followed was unlike any battle in recorded galactic history. The mining ships used their plasma cutters to slice through Krillian armor. The cargo haulers rammed enemy positions with their reinforced hulls. One passenger liner captain actually used his ship's artificial gravity to create localized distortions that sent Krillian fighters spinning out of control. On the ground, Webb was running through collapsing tunnels with 3 young dragons secured in his arms. The Krillian soldiers were gaining on him, their energy weapons lighting up the darkness behind him. Their chittering war cries echoed off the stone walls, promising terrible fates for any survivors they caught. "Come on, kids," Webb panted as he navigated by the light of his helmet lamp. "Almost there. Just got to reach the surface and we're home free." One of the young dragons made a soft sound that somehow conveyed both fear and trust. Webb realized they were trying to comfort him even though they were the ones in danger. The gesture nearly broke his heart. He emerged from the tunnels to find chaos. The Krillian ground forces had established a perimeter around his ship, but they were under attack from an unexpected source. Several human civilians had somehow landed nearby and were engaging the enemy with nothing more than mining equipment and sheer stubborn courage. "Webb!" shouted a familiar voice. It was Dr. Sarah Kim, a xenobiologist from the outer colonies. She was using a geological survey drone as an improvised weapon, ramming it into Krillian soldiers with surprising effectiveness. "This way. We've got a clear path to your ship." Webb sprinted across the battlefield, clutching the young dragons protectively. Energy bolts sizzled past his head, but he kept running. Behind him, he could hear the Krillian commander roaring orders in its alien language, furious that these primitive mammals were disrupting their operation. The young dragons seemed to sense they were close to safety. One of them poked its head out of the containment unit and made a sound like tiny bells ringing. Immediately, every human in the area felt a surge of protective instinct so strong it was almost overwhelming. "Did you feel that?" Dr. Kim asked as she helped Webb reach his ship. "Yeah," Webb replied, securing the dragons in the transport's medical bay. "I think they're trying to say thank you." Above them, the space battle had reached a crucial point. The civilian fleet had managed to disable one of the bioships through sheer numbers and creative tactics, but the other 2 were regrouping. The Krillian commander in orbit was screaming orders to his subordinates, demanding they stop this embarrassing defeat at the hands of a species barely out of their own solar system. That's when someone made a discovery that would change everything. Lieutenant Torres, one of Sarah's surviving pilots, had been analyzing the Krillian bioships during the battle. Her sensors had detected something unusual about their power cores. "Chen, you need to hear this," Torres reported. "Those bioships aren't just vessels. They're alive. And I think they're in pain." The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. The Krillians weren't just using biological technology. They were enslaving living creatures, forcing them to serve as ships against their will. The distress signals she was detecting weren't from the ship's systems. They were screams. The discovery changed everything about the battle. Sarah stared at her scanner readings, watching the bioship's distress signals pulse like heartbeats. These weren't weapons of war. They were victims, just like the young dragons Webb was trying to save. "All units, new priority," Sarah broadcast. "Those ships are alive and being controlled against their will. We're not just fighting the Krillians anymore. We're staging a rescue operation." Dr. Kim, still on the surface, overheard the transmission and immediately began analyzing the bioship signals with her xenobiology equipment. "Chen, I'm reading massive neural inhibitor networks throughout those vessels. The Krillians have basically lobotomized them and turned them into living ships." The revelation spread through the human forces like wildfire. Every civilian captain, every fighter pilot, every person who had dropped everything to come help 3 young dragons now understood they were dealing with something far worse than conquest. This was slavery on a scale beyond imagination. Captain Vasquez of the Stubborn Mule was the first to act on this information. Her mining barge carried plasma cutters designed to free trapped miners from collapsed tunnels. "If those neural inhibitors are what's keeping these creatures enslaved, then we cut them loose," she declared. "Vasquez, that's insane," Sarah protested. "You'll have to get in close to those ships. One hit from their weapons will vaporize you. Then I guess I better not get hit." The mining captain directed her ship toward the nearest bio vessel, her plasma cutters already warming up. As she approached, she could see the ship's surface more clearly. What she had thought was armor plating was actually scales, each one the size of a building. This had once been a creature of incredible beauty, swimming through space as easily as a whale through ocean waters. "Easy, big guy," Vasquez whispered as she positioned her cutters over the neural inhibitor nodes Dr. Kim had identified. "This is going to hurt for a second, but then you'll be free." The plasma cutters sliced through the Krillian control systems like hot knives through butter. Immediately, the bioship began to convulse as sensation returned to its tortured nervous system. The Krillians inside scrambled to regain control, but it was too late. The creature's first act of freedom was to scream, a sound that resonated across multiple dimensions and nearly shattered every piece of glass in the human fleet. It was a cry of rage, pain, and joy all combined into one overwhelming expression of a soul finally unshackled. Then, it turned on its former captors. The freed bioship began attacking the other 2 vessels with a fury that was terrifying to behold. It had endured centuries of slavery, forced to participate in the destruction of countless worlds. Now it had a chance for revenge, and it took that chance with enthusiasm. On the ground, Webb had finally reached his transport ship with the young dragons. But as he prepared for takeoff, one of the little ones began making urgent sounds and pointing back toward the mountain. Through the growing psychic connection they seemed to share, Webb understood what they were trying to tell him. "Your mom's still alive down there, isn't she?" he asked gently. The young dragon nodded, its eyes bright with hope and desperation. Webb looked at his ship's scanner readings. Zephyra was indeed still clinging to life, but barely. Her quantum signature was fading fast, and the collapsed tunnels would make reaching her nearly impossible. "I'm sorry, little ones," Webb said softly. "She's too far away and she's too badly hurt. Even if I could reach her." But the young dragons weren't giving up. They began to glow with an inner light, their scales shifting through colors Webb had no names for. He realized they were trying to do something with their quantum abilities, something they had never attempted before. The 3 young dragons linked their minds together, pooling their limited powers. They reached out across the rubble and stone, following the familiar quantum signature of their mother. And somehow, impossibly, they began to heal her from a distance. Webb watched in amazement as his sensors showed Zephyra's life signs growing stronger. The young dragons were exhausting themselves in the effort, but they refused to stop. They had learned something important from watching the humans. Sometimes the impossible was just another word for something that hadn't been tried hard enough. Above them, The space battle was turning into something unprecedented. 2 more bioships had been freed by other human vessels, and they were now fighting alongside their former captives against the Krillian fleet. The insectoid invaders, who had conquered 12 star systems, were being routed by a rescue mission that had started with 3 human pilots responding to a cry for help. The mountain shook as Zephyra pulled herself from the rubble. The great dragon's wounds were healing, sealed by the combined will of her offspring and powered by their desperate love. She rose on shaking legs, her scales beginning to regain their brilliant luster as quantum energy flowed through her massive form once again. Webb watched in awe as the ancient being emerged from the collapsed tunnels. Even injured, Zephyra was magnificent, easily the size of a city block, with wings that seemed to contain fragments of nebulae. Her eyes held the wisdom of millennia and the fierce protective love of any mother. The young dragons chirped excitedly at seeing their mother alive, but their effort had exhausted them. They slumped in Webb's arms, their small forms trembling with fatigue. Zephyra approached slowly, her great head lowering to nuzzle her children gently. When she looked at Webb, her mental voice filled his mind with crystalline clarity. You came for them. You risked everything for children that were not your own. That's what humans do, Webb replied simply. Kids in trouble, we show up. Doesn't matter whose kids they are. Zephyra studied this strange biped who had somehow become the savior of her lineage. In her 10,000 years of life, she had encountered many species, but none quite like this. Most civilizations protected their own kind first and foremost. These humans seemed to extend their protective instincts to any young life in need. Your species is either very wise or very foolish, she observed. Webb grinned. Most days it's hard to tell the difference. Above them, the space battle had reached its conclusion. The freed bioships had overwhelmed the remaining Krillian vessels, and the insectoid survivors were fleeing in whatever escape pods they could find. But Sarah Chen wasn't content to let them simply leave. This is Commander Chen to all bioships, she broadcast. Those Krillians will just find more victims if we let them go. I think it's time they learned what happens when you threaten children in front of humans. The response from the freed creatures was immediate and unanimous. They had endured centuries of slavery and forced participation in countless atrocities. The opportunity to ensure their captors could never harm another innocent being was one they embraced wholeheartedly. The pursuit was swift and merciless. The bioships, finally free to use their natural abilities, proved far superior to any Krillian technology. They moved through space like living auroras, beautiful and terrible in their power. One by one, they tracked down the fleeing escape pods, but when they caught the Krillians, they didn't destroy them. Instead, they delivered them to the nearest civilized world for trial and imprisonment. Even in their rage, the freed creatures understood the difference between justice and revenge. The Krillian commander, captured alive, was defiant to the end. You have only delayed the inevitable, it hissed as human forces took it into custody. The swarm has conquered 12 systems. More ships will come, more worlds will fall. Captain Vasquez, her mining barge scarred but intact, looked at the defeated insectoid with something approaching pity. You really don't understand humans at all, do you? We just turned your own bioships against you with mining equipment and passenger liners. You think we're worried about more of your kind showing up? Dr. Kim was already working with the freed bioships to locate other Krillian fleets. The creatures possessed vast knowledge of their former captors' movements and strategies. Within hours, she had compiled a comprehensive database of Krillian positions throughout the sector. We've got locations on 17 more fleets, she reported to Sarah. Each one has dozens of enslaved bioships if we can free them all. Then we turn their own weapons against them, Sarah finished. It's poetic justice on a galactic scale. Back on the surface, Zephyra was preparing to leave with her children. The ancient dragon had decided to abandon her mountain home and seek out other surviving members of her species. The galaxy was clearly changing, and she wanted her offspring to be part of that change. Where will you go? Webb asked as he helped secure the young dragons for transport. To the stars, Zephyra replied. There are others like us, scattered and hiding. It is time to bring them together. The galaxy needs guardians again, and perhaps we can learn from your example." She paused, fixing Webb with her ancient gaze. "Your species has shown us something remarkable today. You prove that protection of the innocent is not limited by biology or origin. You have reminded us what it truly means to be guardians." Webb felt honored by her words, but also humbled. "We just did what felt right. When kids are in trouble, you help them. It's that simple." "Perhaps," Zephyra said softly, "but your simple response may have saved more than just my children. It may have saved the galaxy itself." 6 months later, the galaxy was a very different place. The human-led liberation fleet had grown from a handful of volunteers to a massive coalition of freed bioships, reformed guardian species, and allied civilizations. What had started as a rescue mission for 3 young dragons had become the largest liberation effort in galactic history. Commander Sarah, Chen stood on the bridge of the flagship Defiance, the converted human colony ship that now served as mobile headquarters for the fleet. Around her, displays showed the locations of dozens of ongoing rescue operations across 17 star systems. "Status report," she called to her mixed crew of humans, freed bioship entities, and various alien allies. "Sector 7 is clear," reported Lieutenant Torres, now promoted to intelligence officer. "The bioships there have been freed, and the Krillian slave masters captured. That's the last of the known fleets in this region." Dr. Kim looked up from her xenobiology station, where she was coordinating with several freed creatures who were helping to identify other enslaved species. "We're getting reports of Krillian activity in the Andromeda Spiral Arm. Looks like they've been busy there for decades." "Then we better get moving," Sarah replied. "How many ships do we have available?" 47 bioships, 32 human vessels, and allied forces from 16 different species," Torres answered. "Plus 3 very special additions to our roster." Sarah smiled as she looked at the tactical display. 3 bright dots moved in perfect formation near the fleet's perimeter. Zephyra and her offspring, now fully grown and wielding quantum powers that defied conventional understanding. The young dragons had matured rapidly under their mother's guidance, and they had dedicated themselves to protecting other young beings across the galaxy. The transformation of the galaxy's political landscape had been remarkable. Species that had hidden from the Krillians for centuries were emerging from their refuges, eager to join the liberation effort. The discovery that the bioships were enslaved beings rather than weapons had changed how everyone viewed the conflict. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the galaxy viewed humanity. These newcomers, barely a century out of their home system, had accomplished what older civilizations had thought impossible. They had turned a galactic conquest into a liberation war simply by refusing to accept that innocent beings should suffer. Marcus Webb, now officially designated as Director of Rescue Operations, was preparing for another mission. His team had become legendary for their ability to extract endangered younglings from impossible situations. They had saved everything from crystalline hive minds to energy-based life forms, treating each rescue with the same dedication they had shown to Zephyra's children. "Ready for another run?" asked Captain Vasquez, who had volunteered her mining expertise for a particularly difficult extraction on a heavily fortified Krillian world. "Always," Webb replied, checking his equipment one final time. "Got word there are some kind of plant children trapped in a processing facility. The Krillians are trying to harvest their photosynthetic abilities." Vasquez shook her head in disgust. "Sometimes I think these bugs couldn't recognize the value of life if it bit them on their compound eyes." The mission launched with characteristic human efficiency. While other species planned for weeks and analyzed every variable, humans had learned to trust their instincts and adapt on the fly. It was the approach that had proven remarkably effective against the rigid, hierarchical thinking of the Krillian war machine. As the rescue fleet departed, Zephyra and her offspring took point positions, their quantum abilities creating protective fields around the more fragile human ships. The ancient dragon had become something of a philosopher in recent months, spending long hours in conversation with human scholars about the nature of protection and sacrifice. "Your species continues to amaze me," she communicated to Sarah during the journey. "You have no natural armor, no claws or fangs, no inherent weapons. Yet you are the most formidable protectors I have ever encountered." "Maybe that's exactly why we're good at it," Sarah replied thoughtfully. "We know what it's like to be vulnerable. We remember being prey animals on our own world, When we see something small and defenseless, we recognize ourselves. The rescue was a complete success. The plant children were freed, the Krillian facility destroyed, and another group of bioships liberated to join the growing fleet. It was becoming routine, but Sarah never let herself forget that each mission represented lives saved and futures preserved. As they prepared to return to base, Webb received a communication that made him smile. It was from his daughter Emma back on Earth, now studying xenobiology at the Colony University. "Dad, I've been accepted to the Guardian Academy that the Dragons are setting up." Her message began, "I want to learn how to protect kids like you do, but with quantum abilities and stuff. Is that okay?" Webb looked at the young dragons flying alongside his ship, their scales now brilliant with maturity and purpose. He thought about all the children they had saved, human and alien alike, who would grow up in a galaxy where protection was valued above conquest. "Looks like the next generation is already planning to take over," he said to himself, and began composing his reply. The galaxy was healing, one rescued child at a time, and at the center of it all, a simple human truth had proven more powerful than any weapon. When children are in danger, good people show up. It didn't matter what species those people belonged to, or what species the children were. The instinct to protect the innocent was the strongest force in the universe. The Krillians had learned that lesson too late. The humans had taught it to everyone else just in time.